Hey everyone, Jonathan here, your wandering vlogger chasing sunsets and street food across the globe. You've seen me dive into the chaos of Bangkok's markets, hike misty mountains in Chiang Mai, and now, I'm in Nonthaburi, this quieter corner of Thailand where the Chao Phraya River whispers secrets to the palm trees. But this video, it's different. It's not just about the places, it's about a person. Or maybe, about me stumbling into something I never saw coming. It started with her comments. Under every video, there she'd be, Patchery Salim, lighting up the section with her enthusiasm. Your smile makes Thailand brighter. Or, this adventure feels like mine too. At first, I chuckled. Fans are the heartbeat of this channel, but over months, her words stuck. They weren't just flattery. They felt real, like echoes of joy I hadn't heard in my own life for years. Divorced at 35, I'd built walls around my heart, traveling to outrun the emptiness. Trust? That was for the naive. Yet here I was, messaging her back, suggesting a casual meetup during my Thai leg. Why not? I thought, it's just coffee with a fan. Now, standing outside a riverside cafe in Nonthaburi, my stomach twists with a mix of excitement and dread. What if she's not who she seems? What if this age gap me at 38, her younger turns awkward? My palms sweat. Doubts flood in like the monsoon rains. Vulnerability hits hard. I've explored ruins and reefs, but opening up? That's the real unknown. As the door opens and she steps out, beaming like the sun breaking through clouds, I feel that pull. Confusion, a spark of romance. Fear of it all crumbling. Is this the start of something beautiful, or just another fleeting moment? Stick around. Let's find out together. But remember, life's adventures aren't scripted, they're messy, real, and sometimes, they change everything. I landed in Bangkok a week ago, the humid air wrapping around me like an old friend. But Nonthaburi, just a short drive north, felt different, less frantic than the capital, with its winding canals and modest temples dotting the landscape. I'd planned this trip for content, vlogging hidden gems, tasting local durian from roadside stalls, capturing the everyday magic that tourists miss. Yet, amid the planning, her name kept popping up in my notifications. Patchery. Her comments were always the first I read, bubbly, full of emojis, praising not just the videos, but the spirit behind them. You make me want to explore my own backyard, she'd written under my last upload. It was harmless fan stuff, but after a string of lonely nights in hostels, I replied, if you're in Nonthaburi, let's grab a coffee. Fan meetup? I hit send before I could overthink it. What was the harm? I was the explorer, after all. Her response came instantly. Really? Oh my God. Yes. Riverside Cafe near the pier? We set a time for the next day. As I rode the taxi from my guest house, doubts crept in. At 38, I'd seen enough of the world to know not everyone is as they seem online. Was this wise? The river glinted under the afternoon sun, boats chugging lazily, but my mind raced with what-ifs. The cafe was quaint, with wooden tables overlooking the water. I arrived early, nursing an iced Thai tea, scrolling through her profile to remind myself why I'd done this. Then, the door chimed. She walked in short, with a fair complexion and a chubby frame that she carried with surprising grace. Her smile lit the room, childish and genuine, like she'd just won a prize. Jonathan, it's really you, she exclaimed, her English accented but fluent. We shook hands awkwardly. Up close, she was younger than I'd pictured, 25, she'd said in messages, but her energy was infectious. I can't believe this, she gushed, plopping down. Your videos helped me through tough days. I smiled, but inside, uncertainty brewed. This felt too real, too vulnerable. What was I even doing here? We talked surface level. My travels, her job at a local marketing firm. She celebrated every little story I shared, laughing heartily at my mishaps with spicy som-tam. But as the sun dipped, I caught her glancing away, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Everyone says I'm too enthusiastic, she admitted softly. I nodded, not knowing how to respond. The evening ended politely, with promises to chat more. Walking back, I felt a strange mix, excited, but heavy with questions. Was this just a fan thing, or the start of something I wasn't ready for? A few days passed, and Nonthaburi's rhythm pulled me in morning markets bustling with vendors hawking fresh mangoes, the distant hum of motorbikes on narrow roads. I filmed a segment on a hidden temple, but my thoughts drifted to Patchery. Her messages kept coming. Try the boat noodles at the floating market. Simple, helpful, no pressure. I invited her to join me for a casual outing exploring the Bang Kwang Central Prison area, not for morbidity, but for its historical vibe and nearby parks. Sounds fun, she replied. We met at a pier, the air thick with uncertainty. She arrived in a bright sundress, her chubby cheeks flushed from the heat, carrying a bag of snacks. I brought rambutan, your favorite from the video. As we wandered, her liveliness shone. She'd point at a stray cat and giggle like it was the funniest thing, or celebrate finding a shady spot with exaggerated cheers. Yay! No sunburn. It was childish, almost disarming, contrasting my more reserved explorer vibe. But beneath it, I sensed layers, moments when her smile faltered, like when she mentioned past rejections. Guys always see me as the fun friend. Not. More, she said quietly by the riverbank. I shared a bit too, my divorce, how traveling was my escape from emotional wreckage. Trust doesn't come easy anymore, I confessed. She listened, her eyes wide, not judging. The day ended with us sharing sticky rice under a pavilion, rain pattering softly. It felt unfamiliar, heavy with unspoken fears, but a spark of connection flickered. Still, doubt lingered. Could this bridge our worlds? The evenings in Nonthaburi had begun to feel less foreign. The warm glow of the street lamps reflected gently on the narrow canals, and the faint scent of jasmine drifted from nearby gardens, mingling with the smell of grilled fish from distant vendors. Patchery and I had fallen into a quiet rhythm, meeting a few times a week, sometimes for coffee at her favorite little spot near the old wooden pier, sometimes for slow walks through the shaded community park where elderly couples practiced Tai Chi under the banyan trees. Her liveliness still caught me off guard in the best way. One evening, as a street musician played a soft lukthung melody on his guitar near the river promenade, she suddenly stood up, swaying her hips to the rhythm with complete abandon. Come on, Jonathan. Live the moment like you always say in your videos, she teased, grabbing both my hands and pulling me into a clumsy, laughing dance. I stumbled through the steps, feeling ridiculous and strangely free at the same time. Passersby smiled indulgently. No one stared. In her world, joy didn't need permission, but the lightness never lasted long. Beneath her bright surface lay something more fragile, something she guarded carefully. We were sitting at a small plastic table outside a night market stall, sharing a plate of pad thai and a cold bottle of Singha. The neon lights flickered above us, casting shifting colors across her face. She had been unusually quiet for a few minutes, twirling her fork in the noodles without really eating. Then, almost in a whisper, she spoke. People always think I'm just happy, always laughing, always celebrating little things. She gave a small, self-deprecating smile, but sometimes I wonder if that's all they see. The chubby girl who's good for a laugh, good for cheering everyone up, not someone to love. The words landed between us like stones dropped into still water. I set my chopsticks down, she continued, eyes fixed on the table. I'm not pretty like the girls in magazines or on Instagram. I'm short, I'm chubby, my face is average. In school, boys would be nice to me, but only when they wanted homework help or someone to make them feel better after a breakup. Later, when I tried dating, they would say things like, "You're so fun," but, she shrugged, the gesture small and practiced. There's always a but. And the but is always my body, always my looks. Her voice trembled at the end, but she forced the smile back into place, as though apologizing for letting the mask slip. I didn't know what to say at first. My instinct was to reassure her, to tell her she was beautiful, that none of that mattered, but I knew those words would sound hollow, like something I'd rehearsed for a camera. Instead, I took a slow breath and gave her the only truth I had. After my divorce, I said quietly, I spent a long time believing no one could love the real me either. Not the version that gets tired, that gets scared, that doesn't always know what he's doing. The vlogger is easy to love, adventurous, confident, always moving forward. But the man behind the camera? I wasn't sure he was worth keeping around. My ex certainly didn't think so. Patchery looked up then. Really looked at me. Her eyes were wide and unguarded. I traveled to outrun that feeling, I continued. I told myself if I kept moving, kept exploring, the emptiness would stay behind. But it follows you, always. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The market noise swirled around us, vendors calling out prices, laughter from nearby tables, the sizzle of meat on hot griddles, but it felt distant, like background music in someone else's life. Then she reached across the small table and rested her hand lightly on top of mine. It was warm, tentative, barely there. "You're more than your videos to me," she said softly. "Even when you're quiet, even when you're tired, even when you don't know what comes next." I turned my hand palm up and closed my fingers gently around hers. We stayed like that, holding on without saying anything more, while the night deepened around us. I didn't know what this was yet, friendship. Something more, something impossible. But in that moment, the uncertainty didn't feel quite so heavy. The vulnerability we had both carried for so long had finally found a place to rest. At least for a little while. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to run. The weeks in Nonthaburi had begun to feel almost routine, yet the familiarity only sharpened the edges of what we still hadn't said aloud. The canals reflected softer light now that the heaviest monsoon rains had passed, and the air carried the clean scent of wet earth and night-blooming jasmine. Patchery and I had fallen into a gentle pattern: morning messages planning the day, late afternoon meetups, evenings that stretched longer than either of us intended. One Saturday, she invited me to her cousin's small family festival at their house near the old Royal Canal. It was nothing grand, just a gathering to celebrate a child's first school milestone, with tables set under a tin-roofed pavilion, plastic chairs, and trays of homemade food. She had been excited for days, texting me photos of the desserts she was helping prepare. "You'll like the kanam chan," she promised. "Layered coconut cake. Very pretty, very sweet like me, right?" Followed by 3 laughing emojis. I agreed to come, but as the afternoon approached, something inside me tightened. I stood in front of the mirror in my rented room, changing shirts twice, feeling suddenly foreign in my own skin. I had traveled through dozens of countries, smiled through language barriers, eaten questionable street food without flinching, but this was different. This was family. This was tradition. This was Patchery's world, and I was about to walk into it wearing the wrong shoes. When I arrived, the yard was alive with ants calling to each other, children darting between legs, and the smoky smell of grilled pork. Patchery spotted me immediately and ran over, her face bright with pride. "You came," she said, grabbing both my hands. Come, everyone wants to meet the Farang who makes videos." She pulled me toward the elders first. I bowed politely, offered the small gift of fruit I'd bought, and tried to follow the rapid Thai that flew around me. I caught words here and there: "Thank you," "welcome," "handsome," but mostly I smiled and nodded, feeling the gap between us widen with every passing minute. Patchery translated patiently, her voice cheerful, but I could see the slight tension in her shoulders when someone asked how long I planned to stay in Thailand. "Traveling," I answered vaguely through her translation. "No fixed plan yet." The words landed heavier than I intended. A few ants exchanged glances. Patchery's smile flickered, then steadied. Later, when the music started and people danced in loose circles, she tugged me to join. I tried awkward steps, laughing at myself, but my heart wasn't in it. The rhythm felt foreign, the laughter too easy, and I kept thinking, asterisk, I don't belong here. I'm just passing through. Asterisk. She noticed. Of course she did. We slipped away to the quiet edge of the property, near the canal where lanterns floated like tiny moons. The party sounds muffled behind us. "You didn't enjoy it," she said quietly. Not accusing, just stating a fact. "It's not that," I replied, rubbing the back of my neck. I felt like an outsider, like I was intruding on something real, Something that's yours, not mine. She looked down at the dark water. You think I don't feel that way too? Every time I watch your videos, every time we walk together, I wonder if I'm just temporary entertainment for you. The words stung because they echoed the question that had been circling in my own head for days. I'm not using you, I said, sharper than I meant to. I'm trying to figure this out. I'm 13 years older. I've got a whole life of baggage. And you're young, full of light. What if I drag you down? What if I leave and you regret this? She turned to face me fully, eyes glistening but steady. And what if you stay and I'm not enough? What if you wake up one day and realize the chubby girl who gets too excited about little things is embarrassing next to your cool traveler life? Silence stretched between us, thick and painful. I canceled our meetup tomorrow, I admitted. I said I had to edit. But really, I needed space to think. Her breath caught. You were pulling away. I was scared. She wiped her cheek quickly with the back of her hand. I thought maybe you finally saw what everyone else sees. That I'm too much, too loud, too me. Tears slipped down her face then, silent and fast. I stepped closer without thinking, brushing them away with my thumbs. I see you, I said, voice rough. I see how brightly you burn. And it terrifies me because I've spent years trying not to feel anything that deeply again. We stood there a long time, the party noise distant, the canal murmuring beside us. Eventually, she leaned her forehead against my chest, and I wrapped my arms around her, tentative at first, then tighter. I don't want to run, I whispered into her hair. But I'm not sure I know how to stay. Then don't decide tonight, she murmured. Just don't disappear. We walked back slowly, hand in hand, the storm between us not gone, but at least acknowledged. The doubts still lingered like humidity in the air, real, heavy, unavoidable. But for the first time, we had named them out loud. And somehow, that small act of honesty felt like the first real bridge we'd built. Fragile, unsteady, but ours. Chapter 5. Building Bridges. The air in Nonthaburi had shifted after that rainy night by the canal. The heaviest clouds had moved on, leaving behind a cleaner sky and a gentler humidity that felt less oppressive. Mornings carried the fresh scent of wet leaves and distant temple bells. And for the first time, I woke up not dreading the day ahead but quietly anticipating it. Patchery and I started spending more intentional time together, not just casual meetups, but shared activities that forced us to learn each other in new ways. She suggested a Thai cooking class at a small community center near the river, one of those low-key places run by local aunties who taught with patience and a lot of laughter. We arrived early one humid afternoon. The open-air kitchen overlooked a narrow canal, with wooden counters lined with fresh ingredients. Lemongrass, galangal, kaffir lime leaves that smelled sharp and alive. Patchery tied her apron with the same childish enthusiasm she brought to everything, already chattering about how she wanted to make tom yum goong perfectly this time. You always say your tom yum is too spicy, she teased me as we chopped chilies. Today, we fixed that. Mild version for the farang. I laughed. But I was watching her more than the knife in my hand. The way her cheeks rounded when she smiled, the careful way she measured shrimp paste, like it was precious gold. It was all so unguarded, so completely her. When I fumbled the first attempt at pounding the paste in the mortar, she burst into giggles, covering her mouth but not hiding the joy. Look at you. Big strong traveler can't crush garlic properly. She stepped behind me, guiding my hands with hers, her body close enough that I could feel the warmth through our thin shirts. Like this slow, then fast. See? It sings. The moment lingered longer than it needed to. Our fingers tangled briefly in the mortar. Neither of us pulled away right away. The aunties pretended not to notice, but I caught their knowing smiles. Later, as we sat on low plastic stools tasting our creations, she grew quieter. The food was good, better than good, but something had shifted in her expression. You know, she said softly, stirring her soup, I used to think no one would ever want to do things like this with me. Cooking, laughing, being silly. They always said I was too much. Too loud, too chubby, too excited about small things. I set my spoon down. Who said that? Ex-boyfriends, friends, even my mom sometimes. in her gentle way. She shrugged, but her eyes stayed on the bowl. So I learned to celebrate alone. Little victories, a good comment on your video, a perfect mango. But doing it with someone, it feels dangerous. Like if it stops, the hurt will be bigger. I reached across the small table and covered her hand with mine. I'm not going anywhere yet, I said. And even if life pulls me somewhere else for work, I don't want to stop this. Whatever this is. She looked up, eyes searching mine. You mean that? I do. I'm scared too. My divorce left me thinking love always ends in silence. But you make me want to talk again. To try. The rest of the afternoon passed in easy rhythm washing dishes together, walking along the canal path as the sun began its slow descent. We didn't hold hands the whole time, but when we did, it felt natural, like something we'd been practicing without realizing it. A few nights later, we found ourselves in a quiet park near the river after dinner. The sky had cleared, stars beginning to prick through the dark. We spread a thin blanket on the grass and lay back, shoulders touching. Tell me something you've never told anyone, she whispered. I thought for a long moment. After the divorce, I stopped believing I could be someone's safe place. I thought I was too broken, too restless. Traveling became the excuse to never stay long enough for anyone to see the cracks. She turned her head toward me. And now, I'm starting to think maybe the cracks are just places where light gets in. And maybe you're the one helping me see that. One come for that I do ard, when maybe you're the one helping me see. She smiled, small and real. My turn. I've always been afraid that if someone really looked at me, all of me, they'd leave. But with you, I feel seen. Not perfect, just seen. We stayed like that until the night grew cooler, her head eventually resting on my shoulder. I slipped my arm around her, careful, like holding something fragile but strong. Misunderstandings still happened, of course. A delayed message made her worry I was pulling back again. A cultural reference I didn't catch left her feeling exposed, but we talked through them now calmly, without the old panic. Each conversation built another layer of trust, brick by brick. One golden evening, we walked along the riverbank as the sun dipped low, painting the water in shades of orange and pink. This time, I reached for her hand first. Here, in the fading light, with the Chao Phraya flowing steadily beside us, something settled inside me. The uncertainty hadn't vanished entirely, but it had quieted. What remained was warmer, calmer, and for the first time in years, emotionally safe. We were building something real, one small, honest step at a time, and neither of us was running anymore. The air in Nonthaburi had changed. The heavy, pre-monsoon humidity had finally broken, leaving behind a softer warmth that felt almost forgiving. Lotus flowers began opening along the smaller canals, their pale pink petals catching the early light like quiet promises. I noticed them more now, small details I used to walk past without a second thought. Patchouli had that effect on me. She made the ordinary feel worth pausing for. We had fallen into a rhythm that surprised me with its comfort. Mornings often started with her texting me a photo of whatever she was eating for breakfast, usually cow new mamuang or a simple bowl of jok, and ending the message with a string of heart and sun emojis. I would reply with a quick video clip of the river at dawn, knowing she would send back some variation of, "Beautiful, you make everything prettier." It was simple, almost silly. One weekend we took the short ferry ride to Kokret, the little island in the Chao Phraya famous for its pottery and slow pace. I had been there before for a quick vlog, but this time felt different. No camera, no script, just us, two people trying to figure out what they were becoming. We rented bicycles and rode the narrow concrete paths that circled the island, stopping whenever something caught her eye, a roadside stall selling grilled bananas, an old woman shaping clay pots with bare hands, a temple courtyard filled with the sound of wind chimes. Patchouri's laughter rang out freely, childish and bright, the way it always did when she discovered something small and perfect. She would hop off her bike, clap her hands once, and declare, "This is the best day," as though the universe had personally arranged it just for her. I watched her and felt something loosen inside my chest, something that had been knotted tight since long before I ever set foot in Thailand. but paradise has a way of surfacing what we try to keep buried. Late in the afternoon, we sat on a wooden bench overlooking the river, sharing a bag of freshly steamed taro rolls. The sun was low, turning the water gold. She grew quiet, which was unusual enough to make me glance at her. "What's wrong?" I asked. She tore a small piece of taro and rolled it between her fingers before answering. "Sometimes I look at you, and I wonder if you really see me. Not the fan who comments on every video, not the cheerful girl who makes everything fun. Just me." Her voice was soft, almost lost in the breeze. I felt the words land like stones in still water. "Patchery. I know I'm not like the women in your travel videos," she continued, eyes fixed on the river. "Not tall, not slim, not exotic in that way people expect. I've spent so many years hearing that I'm cute, or funny, or sweet, like those are consolation prizes. And then you came along, and for the first time I thought maybe someone could want all of me. But then I get scared. What if the age thing bothers you later? What if you wake up one day and realize I'm too much, or not enough?" The vulnerability in her voice cut deeper than I expected. I set the food down and turned toward her fully. "I'm scared too," I admitted. "Every day. I'm 13 years older. I come with baggage, divorce, years of running from anything that felt permanent. I keep waiting for this to feel temporary, like every other connection I've had since the split. But it doesn't. It feels steady. And that terrifies me more than anything, because steady means I could lose something real." She finally looked at me, eyes glassy but searching. "I don't want perfect," I told her. "I want honest. And you've been the most honest person I've met in a long time. Your joy isn't an act, it's who you are. Your softness, your fears, the way you celebrate little things like they're miracles. That's what I see. All of it." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. A dragonfly hovered near the water's edge, its wings catching flashes of sunset. Then she reached for my hand, her fingers small and warm against mine. "I want to believe you," she whispered. "I'm trying so hard to believe you." We stayed like that until the sky turned violet and the first evening boats began their slow return to the mainland. On the ferry ride back, she leaned her head against my shoulder, and I didn't pull away. The fear was still there on both sides, but it had lost some of its sharpness. In its place was something quieter, something that felt dangerously close to trust. That night, back in my rented room, I lay awake listening to the ceiling fan and the distant barking of village dogs. For the first time in years, the thought of leaving didn't feel like relief. It felt like something I might regret. The tide was turning, slow and stubborn, pulling us both toward deeper water. And for once, I didn't want to swim away. Chapter 7. Climax of the Heart. The sky over Nonthaburi had turned the color of bruised mangoes that afternoon, heavy clouds rolling in from the Gulf as if the weather itself sensed the storm brewing between us. I had received the email 2 days earlier, an invitation to join a collaborative travel series in Vietnam, departing in 10 days. 3 weeks of filming, new destinations, new content, the kind of opportunity my channel had been chasing for months. I should have been excited. Instead, I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the same one that had appeared every time life asked me to choose between staying and leaving. We met at our usual spot by the river, the small wooden pier near the old temple, where the water moved slow and dark beneath the overhanging tamarind trees. Patchery arrived first, wearing the pale blue blouse I had once complimented, the one that made her skin look like morning light. She carried 2 plastic cups of iced coffee, condensation already dripping down the sides. When she saw my face, the smile faltered. "You're leaving," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. I nodded, taking the coffee she offered. "It's only 3 weeks, maybe 4. I'll be back before the rainy season really settles in." She looked out at the river instead of at me. A long tailboat passed, its engine a low cough against the quiet. That's what people always say. Only a little while. Then the little while becomes never. The words landed heavier than I expected. I had heard versions of this fear from her before, scattered confessions about ex-boyfriends who promised to stay, who left polite messages, and never returned, but hearing it now, directed at me, felt different. personal, accusatory in the gentlest possible way. Patchery, I started, but she shook her head, small and quick. I know you have to go. Your work is your life. I've watched every video, Jonathan. I know how much it means to you. She finally turned to me, eyes bright and dangerously steady. But I also know how easy it is to keep moving. To tell yourself the next place will be better, safer. That staying hurts more than leaving. I opened my mouth to protest, but nothing came. She was right. For years I had run from the wreckage of my marriage, from the silence of empty apartments, from any feeling that threatened to hold me still. Travel had become both armor and excuse. I'm scared, she whispered. The admission so soft I almost missed it over the lap of water against the pier. I'm scared that if you go, you'll realize how much easier it is without me. Without the age difference, without the cultural things you still don't understand, without someone who looks like me. Her hand gestured vaguely toward herself, round cheeks, soft waist, the body she had learned to apologize for long before we met. I'm scared you'll wake up in Hanoi or Da Nang and think, why did I ever complicate things? The honesty in her voice cracked something inside me. I set the coffee down on the weathered wood between us, untouched. I'm scared too, I said, the words rough in my throat. I'm scared that if I stay, if I choose this, choose us, I'll fail you the way I failed before. That I'll disappoint you, or hurt you, or wake up one day and realize I'm not built for staying. I'm terrified that I'll ruin the best thing that's happened to me in years because I don't know how to stop running. Silence stretched between us, thick and painful. A breeze moved through the tamarinds, carrying the faint scent of incense from the nearby temple. Patchery's shoulders rose and fell with a long, trembling breath. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier, though tears stood bright in her eyes. Then let's be scared together. I looked at her, really looked. At the woman who celebrated finding parking spots, who laughed until she snorted at bad puns, who had quietly taught me that joy could be a deliberate choice, even when the world felt heavy. The woman who had seen my videos and somehow seen me beneath them, long before I ever knew her name. I love you, I said. The words came out simpler than I expected, stripped of everything except truth. Not the idea of you, not the fan who comments on my videos. You, the real, complicated, sometimes too loud, sometimes too quiet you. I love you, Patcheray. And I'm tired of being afraid of what that means. She blinked rapidly, tears spilling over. But she didn't look away. I love you too, she answered, voice breaking on the last word. Even when it hurts, even when I'm terrified you'll leave, I still choose you. I reached for her hand. Her fingers were cold despite the humid air, but they curled around mine with surprising strength. We sat like that for a long time, two frightened people holding on while the river kept moving beneath us, steady and unhurried. Eventually, she leaned her head against my shoulder. Will you come back? She asked, almost too quiet to hear. Yes, I promised. And when I do, I want to talk about what happens next. Not just the next trip, the next year, the next 10 years, if you'll have me. She turned her face into my neck, and I felt her smile against my skin, small, shaky, but real. I'll have you, she murmured, all of you, even the parts that are still learning how to stay. The clouds finally broke above us, releasing the first warm drops of rain. We didn't move. We stayed there on the pier, hands clasped, letting the water fall around us like a quiet blessing. The uncertainty hadn't disappeared, it probably never would. Not completely, but for the first time, it felt smaller than the thing we were building together. That evening, as the rain softened to mist and the temple lights came on across the river, we chose each other again not because it was easy, but because it was worth the fear. And in that choosing, something deeper than romance began to take root. A love strong enough to survive doubt, mature enough to grow through it, and honest enough to last. Chapter 8. Eternal Sunrise. The river had changed since that first awkward meeting. Back then, the Chao Phraya was just a backdrop for my vlogs, pretty, useful, forgettable. Now it was the calendar we measured by. Every morning I woke to its low murmur through the open window of the little house we rented on the Nonthaburi side. and every evening we walked down the same dirt path to watch the sun dissolve into water. Patchery called it our daily reset. I called it the only routine I'd ever wanted to keep. We had moved in together 6 months after I decided not to leave Thailand. The decision wasn't dramatic. There was no airport sprint or rain-soaked confession. I simply told her one night, over lukewarm khao soi, that my next contract shoot could wait. She blinked twice, then laughed the same bright, unguarded sound that had first hooked me and said, "Good. I was about to start hiding your passport anyway." The house was nothing special. One bedroom, a kitchen barely big enough for two, and a balcony that creaked when we leaned on the rail. But it smelled like lemongrass and her shampoo, and every drawer held evidence of joint occupation. My camera bag shared space with her collection of mismatched teacups. My tripod stood next to her, drying herbs. The ordinary details felt like quiet victories. Our content evolved too. Subscribers noticed the shift. Fewer solo drone shots, more two-person frames. Patchery appeared on camera reluctantly at first, always angled away, always insisting the lighting was wrong. Over time, she learned to look straight into the lens without flinching. "If you can survive my cooking disasters," she told the audience during a live stream, "you can survive anything." Comments poured in, some kind, some cruel about her size. I deleted the worst ones before she saw them. She deleted the ones I missed before I did. We never discussed the strategy out loud. We just knew. Evenings were ours alone. We'd eat on the balcony, usually whatever she'd improvised from the market hall, while the sky turned the color of overripe mango. She still celebrated small things with the same theatrical delight. The first fireflies of the season, a perfectly steamed glutinous rice cake, the way my accent mangled the word sabai sabai. I'd pretend to roll my eyes, but I loved it. Her joy was contagious in the way good medicine is taken daily. It healed things you didn't realize were broken. We argued, of course. Real couples do. Last month, she spent 3 days furious because I forgot to tell her I'd extended a work trip by 2 days. I came home to find the bedroom door locked and a note in childish block letters. "Explore somewhere else tonight." I slept on the balcony, listening to frogs and regretting every shortcut I'd ever taken with trust. When she unlocked the door at dawn, she didn't say sorry first. She just handed me a cup of coffee and said, "Next time, text." I nodded. We both knew the apology was in the gesture. The proposal wasn't planned. We had gone down to the river early one January morning, her idea, because the light at sunrise was cinematic, like your videos but without the filter. Mist hung low over the water. A fisherman poled past in silence. We stood shoulder to shoulder, hands in pockets against the chill. I remember feeling the exact weight of the ring box in my jacket, tiny, ridiculous, something I'd bought on impulse in Chiang Mai and then carried for weeks without courage. I pulled it out anyway. Not on one knee. The ground was muddy. Just turned to her and said, "Marry me, Patch." Not because the story needs an ending, but because I want the next chapter to have you on every page. She stared for so long I thought I'd ruined it. Then her face crumpled, not in sadness, but in that unguarded happiness she still couldn't quite believe was hers. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, you idiot. Of course yes." She punched my arm lightly, the way she did when she was too emotional to speak properly. We laughed until the fisherman glanced over, confused. We didn't post the video. Some moments are too small for the internet. Instead, we went home and cooked breakfast, burnt the eggs, ate them anyway, and spent the day telling no one but the river. Later, when we finally called her parents and my sister, the words felt ordinary. "We're getting married." No fireworks, no crowd. Just us, deciding that enough doubt had already been survived. That night we lay in bed with the fan whirring overhead. She traced circles on my chest and said, "I used to think love was something that happened to other people. Prettier people, thinner people, people who didn't talk too much." I kissed the top of her head. "Good thing I'm not other people." She snorted, then grew quiet. "Will it always feel this safe?" I thought about it. No, probably not, but we've learned how to fix it when it doesn't. Outside, the river kept moving, steady as ever. Inside, the house creaked once, settling around us as it approved. And for the first time in a long while, I fell asleep without planning an escape route. The sunrise would come again tomorrow, maybe cloudy, maybe perfect, but it would come. And so would she.